Hi, good morning, everyone. We are now on the second panel for today. We have a really interesting set of papers that are going to be talking about care in various forms. We have about five papers, and we've already told all the authors what the time distribution is going to look like. I'm just going to go in the order that's on the schedule. So, if we can get started with the many worlds within school, gendered spaces, over to you.
Uh, Hi, good morning, everybody. We'll directly start with the presentation. So, in this paper, we draw from an ongoing multi sited qualitative feminist research mapping gender based practices in government schools in India, happening across 8 states, as visible on the slide, wherein we explore how everydayness within schools shapes the gendered subjectivities of young people, especially those living at multiple margins in our society. The paper positions government schools in India as contested terrains where hierarchies of caste, class, gender, religion, sexuality, and inability are reproduced, negotiated, and subverted, carrying within them both emancipatory possibilities and deeply entrenched disciplinary social hierarchies. We ground our research in a feminist participatory and youth led methodological framework and move away from a narrow and utilitarian understanding of schools and schooling by centering young people as critical knowledge producers and key stakeholders in our study. Through interactive, creative, art, and play based pedagogical interventions, we engage with learners from 9 to 12 grades currently enrolled in government schools and interview institutional stakeholders like principals, teachers, non teaching staff, and block level government officials to understand how schools and the spaces within reproduce dominant gendered norms and power relations through everyday routines.
The contemporary educational landscape, shaped by deepening inequalities, shifting imaginaries of nationhood and citizenship, and rising aspirations of young people, demands a critical examination of the interlinkages between education, society, and the state in the production of a gendered citizenry. Beyond nation building and post liberalization narratives, the language of quality and equality has gained political traction today, even as persistent fractures expose the messy realities of schooling. Our reading of the emerging data highlights how public schools, despite commitment to social justice, often reproduce a peculiar caste, class, gender coded middle class respectability. Amid heightened upheavals and aspirations, largely shaped by urbanization and media, schools continue to remain highly contested terrains for young people. For the scope of this paper, we elaborate on three themes: practices around food and eating, discipline and punishment, and the question of language in everyday interactions to show how seemingly mundane routines in school life become key sites through which inequalities is normalized, negotiated, and contested simultaneously.
Food emerges as a social text, encoding multiple hierarchies and boundaries of purity, prestige, friendship, and speciality that get negotiated within the microgeographies of everyday school life. In Rajasthan, learners share how caste dynamics dictate the very organization of food distribution system. A young girl, Akanksha from Rajasthan, unmasks the act of distributing food as a position of privilege reserved for upper caste girls in her school. Exclusion of girls from historically marginalized communities from these practices is not incidental. It reinforces entrenched notions of purity and pollution while spatially demarcating visibility and moral worth.
Only upper caste girls in school get to distribute meals in school. They dominate, mock, and exclude lower caste girls. We complained. The teacher promised that we would also be given a chance, but that day never came.
Food also signifies an aspirational quest towards a certain modernity embedded in everydayness. In a context where the spatial fabric of our institutions continue to isolate and exclude young aspirational bodies. Aliza, our learner from Delhi, says,
My class monitor from a private school and well off family brought food arranged and packed in different compartments neatly. I longed to eat with her but never could. She wasn't a friend, only monitor. I carried the wish to befriend her for 2 years, but could never even look her in the eye.
Aliza's account demonstrates food as a material signifier. The tiffin's contents matter, but so do its form, presentation, and provenance. The segmented, decorated containers, the neat packing, and the standard quality all signal a certain status. These cues make the monitor an object of desire and admiration, but also an index of unbridgeable difference. The geography and speciality of schooling is therefore discursive, getting shaped by dominant ideas governing everydayness in schools. While food solidifies divisions, it also fleetingly blurs them, where acts of sharing and eating together can be read as moments of equality, ephemerally suspending spatial hierarchies. Ajay, a learner from Rajasthan, points out.
Friendships are formed because those of us who bring our lunch to school sit and eat together. There is no caste based discrimination there, whether one belongs to the Mali community or the Raigar community. But we cannot go to their home and eat together. It is through sharing meals at school that our friendship has been built.
Here, commensality and having a shared space becomes a vital part of young students' everyday social discourse. The school tiffin breaks the physical barriers of separation between young learners and brings them together fleetingly, although within the physical walls of the school.
While food practices reveal material enactment of social hierarchies, practices of discipline and surveillance lay bare how hierarchies are moralized. Teachers and principals' justification of public humiliation and physical punishment as necessary for instilling obedience evidences the physics of micropower, where authority operates through regulation of bodies and internalization of norms. These rituals of corporal disciplining, in that sense, not only internalize and normalize authority, but also produce compliant subjects, rendering obedience as a marker of moral worth. We observe that disciplinary and moral rationales are institutionally enacted through routinized practice of public shaming and public correction.
According to the state, punishment is not appropriate anymore. But it's not like we do not punish. Students who break rules are made to recite aloud difficult math tables and answer questions publicly during assembly so that they feel that they're left behind and prepare accordingly.
This principle, belonged to a Patil caste in Maharashtra, emphasizes on how publicly humiliating and singling out students translates into immediate self-realization, compliance, and motivation on part of the student, especially under the moral authority of the educator. In Madhya Pradesh, this takes a more subtle and a coded form. An upper caste school principal referred to acts of public humiliation as samjhaish, a Hindi term that indicates intimidation as moral guidance. In Rajasthan, discipline took overtly corporal forms of punishment like cleaning the school, washing utensils, or becoming murga. Through these practices, discipline is transformed into a moral and public spectacle where learners' bodies become site of public enactment of authority. However, learners' narratives reveal that these regimes of discipline are neither total nor uncontested. They are acutely aware of the shifting moral orders and power dynamics. In Delhi, during a learner session in school uniform and appearance, Adil shared.
Nowadays, the master himself is scared to beat or say anything to the student.
His realization emphasizes on the reconfiguration of power, in which teachers are cautious and constrained by state regulations and are afraid of personal repercussions, highlighting the fragility of discipline. In the same session, learners described subtle acts of defiance as
if the teacher taunts us or says something unnecessarily, I glare at him such that I will pounce on him and eat him alive.
Highlighting how staring in this context becomes a form of resistance and unsettles the teacher's moral authority. In another instance, a learner shares about his deliberate choice to defy norms and being repeatedly taunted for speaking with girls.
If you even talk a little bit with the girls, the teachers say, is your Javani getting in your head? Seems like your hormones are jumping out. And even if you do nothing of this sort, you'd still get blamed. So we might as well just do it.
Here we see how repeated humiliation produces not compliance, but defiance, and students reclaim agency and dignity by symbolically winning against the hostile institution. We read these as fractures that create space for defiance and deviance, wherein authority is reinterpreted, mocked, and resisted within the limits of institutional control and the broader project of schooling.
Language emerges as another central medium through which caste, culture, gender, and religious hierarchies are reproduced within everyday school life. Through slurs, casual remarks, and tonal cues, everyday speech often collapses difference into deficiency, positioning marginalized learners as culturally lacking and in need of assimilation into the dominant imaginaries of modernity. Such language operates through what Ahmed describes as affective economies, where disgust, pity, and benevolence circulate to naturalize hierarchy and render inequality commonsensical within pedagogical spaces.
If these children don't come to school, what will they learn? What will they become in the future? They have a life expectancy of about 35 25 years anyway. They indulge in so much substance use. By the age of 13, 14, they start giving birth. They can memorize verses perfectly in madrasas, but in school, they just can't remember anything from the textbooks.
This extract, articulated by a Hindu Rawat teacher in Rajasthan while describing disciplinary practices for students from the Cheetah community, a community occupying an in between position between Hinduism and Islam, shows how pedagogical authority and social prejudice converge in everyday school interactions. Shaped amidst resource constrained classrooms and communal realities, such utterances nonetheless reproduce deficit ahistorical framings, rendering certain learners as effectively uneducable. Language also governs behavior through anticipation, fear of utterance, and internalized surveillance. The school emerges as a space of preemptive compliance, where learners often know in advance how their bodies, actions, and relationships will be read.
Teachers suspect that girls with bigger chests or wider waists must be sexually active. Otherwise, why would their bodies be growing like that? We boys also talk among ourselves that the girl's breasts are big. She doesn't even wear her dupatta properly. She must be doing it.
Here, language creates a shared moral vocabulary through which bodies are read, policed, and sexualized. The same grammar of suspicion circulates among peers, demonstrating how disciplinary language reproduces itself horizontally once internalized. Beyond this, the language of seva, pavitrata, and kinship, invoked through idioms such as ma jaisi, bhai ben, and guardian, recast professional authority as moral guardianship within schools.
In school, we are the children's parents. Serving them is our work. The more freedom you give them, the better they learn. But tribal girls also study here, so we have to keep extra surveillance. They get led astray quickly, you know.
The insistence on seva produces an added pressure on teachers to inhabit the role of guardians who must control in order to protect, binding some bodies more tightly to moral scrutiny. Authority becomes intimate and affective, and care collapses into suspicion, marking kinship metaphors benevolent rather than discriminatory. Language disciplines the figures in authority as well. It establishes the ideas of who can lead or whose authority will be accepted. A divorced Meena Adivasi widow principal from a government school in Ajmer, Rajasthan reflects.
I don't see myself as Meena, but people keep reminding me. I only sit on this chair. I don't have power, only responsibilities.
She embodies what Patricia Hill Collins terms the outsider within the habitus of school, present in power structures, yet never fully authorized by them. Her layered identity is repeatedly weaponized, wherein language sets a ceiling to her power, and precisely because it is familiar and often framed as care, language remains one of the most potent and least questioned forms of power within everyday school life.
We're going to take one last minute. We want to reiterate that school as a site where space, place, and scale intersect allows for belongingness to get practiced and policed both. Scale operates at the confluence of micro, meso, and macro dimensions. Micro being the embodied experiences of learners, within the meso being the school as an institutional space, and the macro as the larger structures of family, society, and state in this context. Moving across these scales allows us to trace how structural hierarchies sediment into everyday spatial interactions and how young people's negotiations, in turn, shape their sense of belonging within schools.
As we move towards our conclusion, we find it necessary to return to the point where most of the historical discourse on schooling has emerged, the question of access. We pause here to reconsider what it means to stand at the gate. At the school gate, the guard, the head girl, and some teachers stand to check uniforms, especially hijabs. They say, "What have you done that you need to hide your face?"
The gate emerges as a space where discipline precedes pedagogy. Across these accounts, the school gate functions as a threshold of conditional citizenship. It condenses multiple regimes of power, gender respectability, religious anxiety, and class aspiration into a single everyday life. School is governed by moral legibility, how one dresses, prays, moves, speaks, and is spoken about. It is shaped as much by these liminal spaces as by classrooms themselves. Belonging must be repeatedly performed at the threshold and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, Thanks to the presentations. I'm just going to leave you with a question which you can respond to in the end, but I thought I'll put it now so that you have some time to gather your thoughts. Because you started your first slide by saying you used a feminist research, participatory research method. For the benefit of the audience, if you could tell us a little bit about what this method entailed, and more importantly, how did this method help you arrive towards these themes that you talked about, right? So if you could just reflect a little bit on that relationship for us in the end. We'll move on to the next presentation by Mohini, who's online, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So, hello everyone. Good morning. My name is Mohini Mushraf, and the paper that I will be presenting today is titled "Who Cares? An Exploration of Conflicting Ideas Around Care Work Through a Study of Community Health Workers in Maharashtra." Mm. Yeah. So, these are briefly the contents of my presentation. I won't go through them due to time constraints. So I'll start with talking about the community health workers. So in India, paid care labor is institutionalized through accredited social health activists and Anganwadi workers for the implementation of Integrated Child Development Services Scheme, ICDS, the National Health Mission, which started with the National Rural Health Mission, in which the ASHAs were first introduced in 2005. The idea was that there should be one ASHA in every village. The parameters have now changed. There are ashas in urban settings as well, but the number of people assigned to one asha worker is 2000, whereas in rural areas it is 1000 1000 sorry, people for one asha worker. These workers, like other paid care workers, comprise 3 of the 4 points of the care diamond in India. The care diamond concept given by Razavi in 2007 is what I've utilized here. Also, other care workers other than the Anganwadi workers and Ashas are the auxiliary nurse midwives and Mitaneens. Mitaneens are seen as the sort of precursors of Asha workers. Mitaneens were utilized by the Chhattisgarh government, and then at the national scale, the Asha workers were created. These community health workers represent the largest volunteer workforce in the world, and this status is at the very core of every protest that has been organized by them in the past few years. As volunteers paid an honorarium, they do not receive their fair monetary due or administrative recognition. Which brings me to what actually attracted me to this topic. So I came across a lot of protests. If in the news we come across, particularly only in the print media, rather, we come across the protests that have been held by ASHA workers and Anganwadi workers. ASHA workers, particularly in Delhi, against the central government, and Anganwadi workers in their respective state governments. In fact, in 2025, mid 2025, also a large scale protest was held in the state of Maharashtra itself. Every few months, one comes across the news of Asha and Anganwadi workers protesting either against their respective governments or central governments. And the major demand in these protests is to increase the compensation, that is, remuneration that is given to them, as well as recognition as employees of the government so that they can access benefits like allowances, pensions, gratuity, etc., travel allowance, dearness allowance. Also safer and better work conditions, compensation for the amount of travel that they have to do, better devices to track and collect data that they are required to supply. But the response from the state government, in contrast to how much work the ASHA workers and Anganwadi workers have had to put in, particularly since the pandemic, since it was a health emergency, the work of the community health workers increased exponentially, and they were not given the protective gear that they required. There was anxiety around the health emergency, around that health emergency, which was not curbed, which was not responded to equally by the government. The response of the state government in Maharashtra, it is usually a lukewarm response where the government promises, there are false promises made about the increase in pay, that 4% of compensation will be increased by 4% after 10 years of work, 5% after 20 years of work, and so on. But these promises are usually just made during the protest time, and no action is taken about them later on. Other responses include intimidation by law and order officials, suppression by the state government by invoking laws like the Essential Services Act to suppress protesters. So this Essential Services Act was recently invoked in 2000 during the 2024 protest by the Andhra Pradesh government, which prohibits strikes in any essential service. So rather than responding to their demands or acknowledging their demands as fair, the government uses false promises, political intimidation, intimidation through authority and suppression. Thus, which brings me to the argument of my paper. My paper is majorly a secondary research. I have focused more on the theoretical aspect of this issue. In this paper, I present the argument that the devaluation of work done by female community health workers is due to the gendered nature of paid care work and is thus treated on par with unpaid care work that women are expected to perform. Thus, the theoretical underpinnings and Shola Orloff says that the culturally constructed and ideologically justified gendered division of labor, masculine authority and privilege, gendered political and affective orientations are critical factors in the way that ASHA workers or community health workers are treated. Community health workers here I'm using to talk about paid care labor in general because it is institutionalized to them in India. Social reproduction theorists also say that it is the gender division of labor, particularly in the reproductive fields, that shapes the patterns in the labor market, the employment opportunities for progress within their work, contractual relations, conditions of work are all affected by these gender divisions of labor. Women tend to be seen as more compliant and therefore as cheaper workers. They are quote unquote easier to exploit in this regard. Women are also seen as more trustworthy. So there, this idea that women are more matronly, they are more akin to or more suited for care labor is also utilized for lower payment and exploitative labor conditions. SRT scholars thus advocate for a non-binary approach that captures the interrelationship between paid and unpaid work and economically productive and socially productive labor to look at it as a unified socioeconomic process. Feminist researchers also talk about how employment in general or paid care labor is looked at through the lens of empowerment for women, but this is not empowerment if it reinforces the gender divisions of labor, which the state government tends to do. This work that is done by the ASHA workers is not looked at as economically productive labor, yet it is an essential task. It is essential tasks that are being performed by them. It leads to the perversion of the linkages between family and the paid work, the significance of care work for the welfare of all, and for the character of gendered relations within the family. To understand this better, I go to the unpaid care work, paid work, and paid care work circle given by the International Labour Organization. As the circle shows, the lower wages and a deterioration of working conditions in the care sectors, in which women are largely overrepresented, is largely a direct consequence of the minimization of unpaid care work. uh, we see that because we minimize unpaid care work, this is translated to paid care work and then also translated to the paid work that women are engaged in or involved in. Another outcome is that care needs of the care workers themselves often go unmet, and the level of care, the type of care that care recipients are receiving, is also affected by this treatment of the paid care workers. Thus, it is all interrelated in terms of theory, and the treatment of unpaid care labor is directly related to the treatment of paid care laborers. Thus, which brings me to the conclusion and recommendations that I would like to make through this paper, is that women's vulnerability to labor exploitation is intensified by a combination of informality, precarity, inequality, and a lack of legal rights and access to justice. Ashas and Anganwadi workers are trusted by the community not just due to their good work, but also because we have an inherent understanding of women being well suited for care work. The devaluation of this paid and unpaid care work and exploitation of community health workers cannot be resolved by the state through half hearted measures or false promises, but requires comprehensive intervention and legal recognition of care work and gender responsive formulation. National and state level policies need to be designed and revised to talk about challenges around safety, mobility, workloads, and social norms, strengthening supportive supervision, including training managers on bias, respectful oversight, and gender responsive management. Other reforms include framing policies ensuring fair remuneration, social protection, clear reporting channels in terms of violence, particularly gender based violence, gender responsive budgeting, and overall safer working conditions. Female staff at the decision making levels is also essential. Currently, we see that that is not the case. The Monitoring for Gender and Equity project, the MAGE project, talks about these gender responsive monitoring and evaluation uh, methodologies, wherein it recommends the collection of gender disaggregated data but also collection of data in terms of gender and power relations indicators and community participatory research to understand the ways in which gender manifests inequities. So these measures can only go so far. These legal and policy measures undertaken by the state or central governments can only go so far until actual social change can occur. But the acknowledgement is requisite for any improvement. Unless we acknowledge the devaluation of unpaid care work, we cannot move on to the proper valuation of paid care work and paid work performed by women. That concludes my paper. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mohini. I'll also leave you with the question so that you can think about it while we come back. You used both the care diamond and the social reproduction theory, both of them. So I wanted you to think a little bit and reflect on sort of how these two theories both, aid feminist conversations, and yet their starting points are really different. So while the care diamond talks more about who the various actors are that are sort of, involved in the process of providing care, the social reproduction conversation is more about how paid and unpaid work are not that separate, right? They're also simultaneously occurring in this case. So the women who are getting paid to do care work are also doing social reproduction work in some sense. So if you can also reflect a little bit on those two theoretical frameworks and what they allow you to ask, and what is missing from these conversations when you put them together. Now, our last presentation, Anika is here. There are several other authors, but Anika is presenting on their behalf.
So, hello everyone. I'm Anika and I'm a doctoral student at Institute of Public Health, Bangalore and Umea University in Sweden. So today I'll be talking about healthcare access for Adivasi communities that are living in forest villages and forest neighborhoods in India. So my study is based within the Center for Training, Research and Innovation in Tribal Health. It's a learning site based in southern Karnataka that is collaborating with the local Soliga Adivasi community on a long-term basis. And there are two parts to my study. The first is a literature synthesis, which I'll be presenting today, followed by a qualitative inquiry, which is ongoing. So none of us, the authors of this paper, are from the Adivasi community, and we acknowledge the social differences between Adivasi and non-Adivasi communities. I have previously worked with Adivasi communities in central India for a couple of years, and my main supervisor is at the center with the long-term collaborative work in southern India. A bit of background on the tribal people. So tribal people form around 8% of the Indian population. 90% of them are living in rural areas, including hilly and forested regions. The government of India has denoted schedule areas which are occupied by tribal people. So you can see in the map, the pink is Schedule 5, which is most of central India, and the green is Schedule 6, which is northeast of India. And then there are areas outside of Schedule. Various terms are used for tribal people. There is indigenous, scheduled tribe, Adivasi. Indigenous is an international term which denotes global solidarity. Scheduled tribe is more of an administrative term used by the government for affirmative policies. And Adivasi has a meaning of belongingness to the territory and also struggles of belongingness. And it is used more in the context of central India. So 40% of tribal people are affected by poverty, and there's low access to literacy. There are gaps in health infrastructure due to geographic and socioeconomic challenges. If we look at social determinants of health, the WHO Commission reports that environments where we live and work are key components of social determinants of health. And opportunities and resources present in our local environments can shape multiple things. So in this study, we are examining healthcare access in relation to the local living environments of Adivasi people. So often in literature, education, occupation, income are attributed as individual level attributes, but the local environments and the opportunities can also determine these. So it's important to look at it in that way as well. Distribution of healthcare services is also shaped by policies, institutions, organizations, and it is often beyond individual level control. In health literature, particularly, often healthcare access is attributed to individual level determinants like education, occupation, but there's less study on the local environment and what factors can shape access there. And for Adivasi communities particularly, it is stated that they live in remote locations or are living very far away. But what are the local factors that are creating barriers to that access is not studied much. This is particularly true for Adivasi communities who have a connection with their land in terms of livelihood, identity, food security, well being, which is not so for non Adivasi communities. And we use neighborhood as a lens here because it gives some kind of structure to the local environment. These are few definitions from literature on neighborhood: place with health relevant resources, social relationships, and how individuals interact daily within these different attributes. So we have used critical interpretive synthesis as a method of literature synthesis. It's an interpretive mode of inquiry, and the critical lens that we use is not to see place only as a physical environment, but also as a social and structural space. And we use different bodies of literature for this synthesis. One is focusing on neighborhood and health, and the other on healthcare access in forest living Adivasi communities. So there are two review questions. The first focuses on conceptualizing neighborhood environment in relation to healthcare. And the second focuses on using this lens then to study healthcare access in forest living Adivasi communities in India. So these were the main two steps of doing the analysis. First was literature on neighborhood and health, and the constructs that we got from that literature synthesis we used to study literature on healthcare access in Indian forest living Adivasi communities. So we have two main themes from our findings. The first focuses on neighborhood as a physical and social environment, and then we build a conceptual framework on the built and social environment of forest neighborhoods in India. So in a neighborhood, socioeconomic disadvantage can shape organization of healthcare access. Then external policies, which are political, social, economic, can also shape distribution of these services within a neighborhood. And locally, social networks, social cohesion, cultural norms, values can shape organization of these processes. So we use Bernard's framework, which is on access to health-related resources, particularly because it helps us that the neighborhood has been organized into a physical and a social environment. And within the social environment, there are different domains through which people use access. So institutional domain, economic domain, community organization, and local sociability. And there are different rules of access through these domains: rights, price, local social networks, and proximity. So this is the framework that we have built. If you see the colors, we start from the center, which is the forest neighborhood, and we divide it into the built environment and the social environment. The green is the built environment and mobile networks, roads, flooding, especially during monsoons, transport around these forest villages create major access issues for healthcare. If you come to the social environment, there are two components. One is connection of the Adivasi people with the forest in terms of their livelihood, identity, well-being, forest rights as well. And if we come to the pink part, that is the institutional environment. So the different actors that are organizing healthcare there, from the government to private providers to traditional healers, to civil society organizations. And if you see the outermost circle, which is the cream one, so those are the policies that shape all of this. So there are wildlife conservation policies, as well as Forest Rights Act, tribal welfare schemes. Among Adivasi communities, the one that are the most vulnerable are the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, and often they are staying furthest from the main road, so their access is the furthest reduced. Services are not reaching them, and wildlife policies are creating challenges with things like construction of bridges, roads, and this is also coming up from our qualitative inquiry that is ongoing. So we say that for Adivasi people, their connection is important, but the reverse is also true. For conservation of forests, also presence of indigenous people, Adivasi people, is extremely important within the forests. And we talked about these different actors that are organizing healthcare access in these villages and the different rules of access. Within the government, there's a conflict of policies as well. While there are wildlife policies which are exclusionary, they want to conserve forests but without the indigenous people. At the same time, there are Forest Rights Act which give rights to these communities. So there are conflicting policies under the same actor, which is the government, but creating these issues. So forest neighborhoods are contested spaces with tensions between fortress methods of conservation and Adivasi rights and their traditional knowledge. Alienation and restricted access to forests impacts their identity, livelihood, well-being, and health. The different actors shape the built and social environments, including forest department, gram panchayat, the government organizations, community health workers, civil society, and all of these critically form the social determinants of healthcare access in these forest villages and neighborhoods. So thank you. With this, I conclude.
Thanks, Anika. I just had one question. If you could just tell us a little bit more about sort of this land alienation that you were talking about, and what are the kinds of impacts that you're seeing on health? You talked about health access, but a little bit more about what has been the nature of health impact on the people there. I believe we have the last presenter online as well. Rajeshri Roy, are you here?
So, a very good morning to the honorable panelist, the host chair, and all the attendees. So, I am Rajarshi. I'm a PhD scholar working from Slovak Technical University in Bratislava. So, I hope it is well audible to all the panelists. And as I'm working on an age-friendly city with a specific focus on cities preferred by older adults to settle, like post-retirement, specifically the middle income group. So it is a privilege to have the opportunity to present at this platform today. So paper for this conference is titled as the Unmapped Pulses, which is towards the central theme in the IIHS annual research conference for contested terrain. So namely, the contestation is between what is mapped and what is lived, like between the representation of urban spaces and the, like the realities experienced by an aging body. So without further delay, I'll begin. So cities as contested terrain. So some of the case examples of the contestation between the generative data and the factual scenarios, like cases of Barcelona. So the generative data, or the one which is like derived from the training model on the massive data set, and the factual scenarios, which is based upon the actual scenario of an urban realm. So in Barcelona, the urban spaces, increasingly governed by platform data, where apartments, street, and even neighborhoods are recognized for global visibility rather than low belongingness. So in the first three images, you can see like how the protesters are protesting against an over tourism takes, like the street of Southern Europe. And the fourth images, which you can see that the distribution of Airbnb listing in Spanish municipalities. So, like the Airbnb and the tourism data that shapes the housing affordability, street life, and the local economies of Barcelona. So these are the contestation in like the Southern Europe of the city of Barcelona about the residents versus the tourist, housing versus the platform capitalism. Like how it leads to, protest. And as you can see through the banners of like how it has been proceeded, like the data which is derived from the Airbnb listing that is treated by the government in shaping the, the public realm of the city. So similar cases that is again found in New York City, where the contestation is between the surveillances, like predictive policing, and like contrasting with the real life scenarios, like where CCTV network, like algorithm risk scoring, and the the real time policing map, which is generated via computer vision, and that sometimes impacts upon rendering as suspect. Like for example, people staying below an underpass, or a person walking from a periphery of a jail compound. So this is how the city demonstrate about how the governments operate, not only through, like the infrastructure, but it services, like how police inspect based upon the computer vision, based upon, like the data, how a person is treated in the category of suspect. So similar case is again the contestation that is found in Singapore, like that is through its pursuit of urban efficiency and the behavioral order. Like, like for example, the discipline is embedded into the built environment, like into the mobility system. Like the city, like is planned to have the best pedestrian flow, like based upon the best surveillance signages, and on this the reward is compliances. Like like for example, who would abide, who would obey, the surveillance system, the pedestrian flow properly, then there is a reward which, like the pedestrian or else the local resident of the city gets. So so again there is a contestation of like this, like the city's logic of cleanliness, and like some treat it as a constraint of, like new adaptability. So as again we all know, like in Mumbai, we know the contestation of formal planning and the, like the ecosystem of informality, like sidewalks and the street, which function simultaneously as, like a social infrastructure, as well as a workspace, or a commercial activity space. Okay. So, aging as a marginalized site of contestation. So, basically, this site explains about the central theme of the paper, that is about the aging. Basically, aging is not just a demographic; it is a spatial and political. Like as elderly body experiences, like slowness, vulnerability, or you say like dependency on many spatial infrastructure. So in that case, the right to the city is often compromised. So my work is on the contestation of a fast-moving city versus the elderly petition. So in the image, as you can see, the concentration of like older adults is in the countries where you can see in Japan it is 29.6%. And in the Western Europe, you can see like in France, UK, it is 19.2, 21.7. So these are the concentration of older adults who are aging above 65 and more. So similar cases were found in European countries like Spain, Portugal, France, which has reached around 24%. So aging, like aging in Europe is accelerating daily, and this raises a fundamental research question that which cities are increasingly preferred by older adults, like as a place to settle and grow old. So that inquiry set the, like the directional starting point of this work. So based upon the data, which the regional data found by WHO, like like the population ages 60 plus in the WHO European region is projected to grow around 215 million in 2021, and it's going to reach around 300 million by 2050, with those aged 80 plus more than doubling. Similarly, based upon the Eurostat data, the EU old age dependency ratio is also increasing from 33.9% in 2024 to 36%, preferably in countries like Italy, Spain, and Portugal. So, like the second image you can see, which stats the growing number of immigrants settling in these countries. like where Spain comes around in second in Europe. So within Europe, like Spain ranks the top destination for for incoming migrants, preferably old migrants who choose climate affordability and services to settle at these places. Okay, so the city chosen for investigation is is in Malaga. It is located in the south of Spain. So within Malaga, there are two neighborhoods, as you can see in the map, Caranque and Santa Marta. So according to the the Spanish census in 2024, based upon the INE report, so these are the area which shows a notable concentration of older adults. So I adopted a model which is grounded in the international aging mandate, like the conceptual, the direction which was built from, 2007 WHO Aged-Friendly City Framework, the Global Network of Aged-Friendly Cities, or the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 11, that is about, the inclusive, safe, and sustainable human settlement, and forwarded by Carlos Monero's, 15-minute city framework, and further towards WHO Decade of Health Aging from 2021 to 2030. So all this framework, might differ in origin or scale, but they converge towards a common, urban aging agenda, that is legibility, dignity, safety. So my model focused upon a city, which can be shaped beautifully, like if we really focus upon legibility, dignity, safety at the first place. Yeah. So here comes the discourse, the problem with the idealized urban model. Like, does predictive models reflect lived reality? So predictive model, like those developed based upon a data set, and then predict based upon the data, or generative model that shapes based upon the data. And that versus the sensory cognitive perception of a older being. So the methodology that I tried to follow is down further is between the cartography of calculation, which is a quantitative parameter on which I have used the, the content based upon the OSM data space syntax, between cartography of corporeality, that is the qualitative parameter, like conducting walk-in interviews, ethnographic observation, so there is a, contestation between both these factors. So first I'll start with the cartography of calculation. So, so the neighborhood of Malaga, where there is predominantly older adults. So in the first three images, like placed in a column way. So it has the concentration of more older adults, and these are the images which proves that the growing number of aging index based upon this area. So the next table is a dimension weighted table, so which is derived from peer-reviewed literature in fields such as geriatric, urban planning, environmental psychology. So based on these weighted dimension, an accessibility mapping was performed, to access the proximity to all the necessary service of an older adult. So so all when these maps are overlapped together, so you can see in the images like trees, the placement of place of worship, bus stop, post office. So all these maps were placed one above the other, and through this, the SMCAO maps was generated, which is special multi-criteria accessibility overlay mapping. So with this mapping, the space syntax algorithm was again applied. Like for example, in this image, you can see like visibility graph analysis. Apart from visibility graph analysis, there is occlusivity mapping and actual line analysis mapping was again conducted. So all these maps were together, overlapped together to understand the visibility, integration, and the cognitive legitimacy of an urban space. So all these analytical values were integrated into a final grid-based representation, like as you can see in the last bigger image, which is resulting in what like I define as the comfortability index of the pedestrian path. Okay, so the next, like the contrast between the other cartography was cartography of corporeality, which was a qualitative dimension. So here we conducted a detailed spatial investigation, like combined with photographic documentation and 46 interviews with older adult who are, like aging more than 65. And the aim was to attend their lived reality, like their sensory perception and the emotional response to their, like neighborhoods. So from this engagement, like several parameters emerge. So this is the mapping which like explains about the sensory perception of the older adult attached to that area. So these rings, which explains about the quality of the space. So based upon the safety, tranquility, brightness, belongingness, and accessibility. And these are some of the summarization of the interviews that were conducted. And it tells, like, for example, there is a ability of rest spot encouraged, which encourage mobility. Like there is presence of trees, absence of, like essential amenities, and, like the sensory discomfort also emerged, like such as, like odor from some waste container, which was placed very close to sitting areas, and maybe which like signals a lack of dignity in the public realm. So those are some of its kind. So the juxtaposition of these two cartography surfaces, like the paper's central theme of contestation. So the, like the model city and the lived city, like sometimes do not align always. So this quantitative layer may declare a, like a neighborhood accessibility, while, like the older adult report, like there is a sensory discomfort, there is a lack of dignity, or, like there is emotional exclusion. But yet, like rather treating this tension as a methodological failure, it will be, like treated as a productive diagnostic tool. So, like by holding both, we, like gain a fuller understanding of like the real life condition. And we can really work towards intervention that are not only efficient on paper, but can be, like meaningful and can be inclusive and can be, like responsive in practice. So that is actually what, like the contestation of uh, the calculation, like which is a quantitative parameters, and corporeality, which is qualitative. Okay. So thank you for the presentation. I hope I could abide with the timeline.
Thanks, Rajashri. Just a very quick question on the. Can you go back to the previous slide? Sorry, I'm forgetting the term there. The cartography of corporeality. If you could tell us a little bit more about what that phrase means and what is sort of what is influencing that kind of phrasing of the city. I don't know if you mentioned it in the PPT. Maybe I missed it. But if you could come, but we've got questions for all the panelists, so we'll come back to you in order. If we can start with, we'll also open it up for the audience, but if you could just start with the first group, if you can tell us a little bit about your methods.
Yeah.
And what does it mean to use a feminist research practice, and how does it actually, because you use the word participatory research methods practice, and what does it allow you to do in terms of your research themes and so on?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think it's a very pertinent question. And I'm very happy that I'm also getting to sort of talk about the participatory aspect of the research, because I think that is also somewhere where our methodological inquiry really sort of comes from. So, I mean, the research actually is based in Nirantar Trust, where we work as researchers. And it sort of began as a multi-stakeholder research study where out of the 8 states that we are working in 5 states, we have partner organizations with which we are doing this research. So our partner organizations are the ones who are sort of holding the research in these states. Now, the important part about the participatory aspect here is that much of the data collection that is being done in this research is also being done by youth researchers who have been identified by the partner organizations that we work with. Now, these youth researchers, of course, we work with them. There is a training process, and we work with them for over a period of a year and a half, 2 years, in which they are part of the data collection work. They're part of the training prior to the data collection work. And after the data collection work, where in some states we have concluded the data collection, now the youth researchers and the partner organizations are also involved with us in sort of reading the data, in sort of trying to understand how to analyze the data and how to make sense of it contextually. Another important thing is that so for example, how it has also helped us sort of arrive at our themes or build our methods and questions. Now, we did mention that with the youth researchers, we specifically work with very interactive kind of pedagogies. And by interactive and art and play based, what we basically mean is that we use pedagogies like story reading, letter writing, also pedagogies where they get to use drawings, maps, etc. Now, these youth researchers are also young people between the age of 18 to 25, 27 roughly, who most of us are also, most of them have also studied in the same schools where they are now sort of interacting with the learners. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, so the themes that we have come up with are also I mean, we sort of thought of 7 entry points in that sense to talk about, to sort of try and understand how we can map what we want to also think of it as everydayness within the space of the school. So we look at the speciality of the school. We look at uniform as an entry point to try and understand, say, for example, how the construction of good vis-a-vis bad students happen in schools. Then we also look at food as a theme, where we look at eating practices, also the lunch break, the time of the lunch break, and we also look at the sort of interactions that happen between teachers and students. We also look into the theme of friendships, and then we also look at uh, interaction, yeah, I mean, like within peers and within the teachers. Sports. Yeah, and we also look at sports. Now, our youth researchers also are involved with us, like I said, across different sort of processes that we work with. So for example, if I can give you an example of the data collection, data, the tool sort of writing process, where we sit and understand how we want to ask certain questions or how the tool can be designed, what are the fundamental research questions that we want to sort of look at. It is right at the beginning that we then start working with our partner organizations. We start working with our youth researchers. I'll give you an example from Assam. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring any data from Assam here because the data collection is still going on. But for example, when we wanted to look at the the theme of food in Assam, we realized, and it is through conversations and discussions with youth researchers in the partner organization that we realized that Dhemaji, where we are working in Assam, um, students from 9th to 10th standard and 11th, 12th subsequently do not actually eat in schools. Because the midday meals stop at 8th, like do not get midday meals after 8th standard. Yeah, so they basically, we really then had to sit and work with them and understand what can be asked differently, what can be done differently. So we had to look at the themes very differently, and they're not, in that sense, linear across the states that we are working in. So that is where the participatory element really sort of comes to life in that sense. Sorry, I've taken a bit long and I digressed, I guess.
No problem. If you could go to you, Anika, and then I'll go to those online.
Yeah. So you asked about how land alienation is impacting health in other ways as well. So I would say nutrition is a big part in which it is affected, because as their access to forest has been restricted, so access to diverse forest foods like leaves, tubers, fruits, everything is now affected, and they are becoming more dependent on ration based meals like rice. So that a big change is happening there. And some of the villages are also being relocated because of these policies again. So mental health issues are also being seen as their connection is very deep seated. So that disruption in the connection is impacting mental health in different ways, including self harm, anxiety. So
Okay, thank you for that. Mohini, and then Rajashri will come to you. Mohini?
Yes. So you asked me a question about the theoretical underpinnings that I had utilized, the care diamond by Razavi and the social reproduction theory. So the care diamond I specifically utilized, I hope I am audible. Yeah, so the care diamond so the care diamond I specifically utilized to highlight the unexpendable nature of community health workers. So the care diamond says that care has to be balanced between these 4 points of a diamond. State is one of them, household is the other, the private sector and the non-profit sector, the market and the non-profit sector. So like the previous researcher also said, the state a lot of times to an extent is now privatizing its own responsibilities of care and health. So, in this regard, ASHA workers become important because whatever care responsibility the state is taking, a majority of it is left to the ASHA workers and Anganwadi workers. And of course, these being women, they are also they also have that care responsibility within their households. So, to highlight that aspect specifically, I utilize the care diamond idea. In terms of social reproduction theory, I used it to, because it does talk about care work and how care work is one of the ways in which marginalization is reproduced in society, or like even accumulation in society is reproduced. The idea, my idea, in which I think both of these can intersect with each other, is that the state can be, because I am in the field of policy, specifically I'm researching about gender responsive policy. So the way I look at it is that state can be a way to address this reproduction of domination and marginalization. State can, through its gender sensitive, gender responsive policy, address this reproduction represented by paid care work. It can redistribute care work so that men are not just seen as alternatives to women, but also equal participants when we look when we talk about or think about care work. Even I would like to give an example in this regard for Sweden, which to a certain extent has been talked about today. So what we see from statistics here is that particularly in Sweden, so there is no concept of community health workers. They have a very well functioning health system. The investment in healthcare is pretty high uh, in that state. So women are not looked at as primarily the caretakers, and we also see that the unpaid care work is more evenly distributed in Sweden. So there is a direct connection between the state taking that responsibility, state looking at gender responsiveness, gender neutrality, and it having impacts or effects within the household as well. So I hope that
Yeah,
is
thank
a
you so much.
satisfactory answer.
Rajashri, if you could respond really quickly, and then we at least have another 10 minutes for the audience before we close.
Yeah, sure, sure. So the question, I hope I'm audible. The question, what you asked, is about, like the cartography of corporeality. So I would state like it is the quality of existence of a physical body, like the bodily existence and the body's role in shaping identity, like perception and the interaction of the world. So basically, cartography of corporeality, it is a concern itself as a embodied experience, like how older adults see, how they feel, how they navigate and inhabit in the city. Like the corporeality, like acknowledges that the urban environment is not only a spatial structure, but also a sensory, like emotional and a social field. So to investigate this dimension, I collaborated with a research institute in Malaga. So it is in Spain. So it was conducted on a on-site fieldwork and like the street of the selected neighborhood. So this included a systematic observation and like the photographic documentation and a structured questionnaire designed to understand this aspect as like what about the dignity, belongingness, and legibility from the perspective of an older adult themselves. So, like this interviews and surveys that raised about how, like the shading, how the resting option, how, like the microclimate, social encounter, noise, and multiple other sensory discomfort, which shape the, like the everyday use of space, that insight, like that purely quantitative, that, like a purely quantitative model cannot reveal. So basically, in short, this calculation mapping, which I was trying to tell about the corporeality and the optimized system of calculation mapping. So this by bringing them together, like the methodology recognize that the aging in place is not only a matter of spatial efficiency, like but also a matter of confidence about understanding about the dignity and the identity in the urban realm.
Great. Thanks so
So,
much for that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you. I'll now open it up for the audience if there are any questions.
So, my first question is to the Nirantar Trust panel. You talked about that how the educational instruments and the punitive measures that were used kind of reinforce the marginalities. But I would want to know what kind of gender dynamics were reinforced in these manners, and how there was certain gender essentialization. You also talked about, for example, defiance. So when I was looking at the example of what you chose as defiance, it seemed to me that there's a gender angle to that also. Such kind of defiance, in my experience, also has come mainly from the boys, and and also reflects a certain kind of idea of masculinity that has been imposed upon them. So, do you think that this defiance is also gender and also comes from a certain conditioning? My other question is to Mohini. So, Mohini, you talk a lot about how we can sort of recognize the unpaid, underpaid care work that is being done by ASHA workers, and probably that will lead to a certain equality in terms of their pay. But I was thinking that do you think that this can in some way lead to better valuation of the unpaid care work that is being done? Also, uh, just because you are using theoretical frameworks, say the way Nancy Fraser says, redistribution versus recognition. So, do you think that this recognition or better pay can also lead to better redistribution among genders of both unpaid and paid care works? And will that have any impact on unpaid care work and better valuation and better recognition of that as well? So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, any more questions, or we'll just go with these? Okay.
Uh, So, to be very crisp, everything, every micro action within the school is gendered. Uh, but I'll give an example of how, say, discipline and surveillance reproduces gendered norms. So, boys, in that sense, today, in many schools, are still beaten up for for the minutest of actions that, according to the teacher, might not appropriate. Girls, on the other hand, are not really beaten up, physically beaten up, but they are policed in the sense where your physicality, on how you dress up, on how you talk, or probably how you sit, how your friends are. So the ideas of masculinity and femininity also again gets reinforced in that sense. But for boys, it takes a much physical form, also because men can take beating. Your bodies are stronger. As over a girl student in that sense who is soft, cully like in that sense. So I would moralize you into telling on what your position is within the school by how I behave, the physical behaviors of it. So yeah, it definitely is gendered. In
Thank
terms
you.
of deviance also, it is girls and boys both, because I know what my position is in the school because of my gender. I know what are my limits of defying and deviance. For a boy, it's all right probably that he could stare at a teacher or call out, cuss the teacher in the class, or slur in that sense. But for a girl, that might not be possible. She might come out and call names to the teacher, but in that sense, she would think 10 times before calling names to the teacher. So yeah, it is that micro and that subtle and how it gets experienced and enacted in the school. It is also gendered in the sense on how teachers behave. Not only gender, there are other intersections also, but gender being the primary arch under which we are talking. Male teachers would then punish boys in a certain way and girls in a certain way, depending on what his caste class location is. Same with the female teachers, how she would punish a boy or a girl. So yeah, there are those complexities in that sense.
Thank you. Mohini, last question to you.
Yes. Yes, like you said, better valuation of unpaid care work as a direct consequence of the clarification that I would like to say is that my contention is that the state paying higher compensation to is a direct would then directly or in a way result into paid care work, and as a result unpaid care work being better valued, because then men can also, if ASHA workers or community health workers are treated as government employees, then men can also be gathered into that fold of paid care work, because then that would be an economically productive. If it is looked at as economically productive work, then men can also be taken as options. Also, it is mentioned in the unpaid care work, paid care work circle that I talked about within my presentation itself, which is given by the International Labour Organization. It talks about this redistribution of unpaid care work amongst genders when paid care work is valued properly, is looked at as economically productive work. So I hope that does answer your question. I was very short. I'm sorry about that, but yeah.
Thank you so much.